Hello. How often do you play in 18/8 meter? Not often. But very interesting. Fauré uses for his 7th Nocturne an extended bar, which is almost as if he wrote barless, since you hear that pulse of heart, short long, boom boom, boom boom. And he starts that 7th Nocturne in the middle of the piece. There is no introduction. And all of a sudden you start with a questioning, first inversion, 6th chord. Where am I? What am I to follow? The melody or the pulsing, walking middle voice? So at the get-go we are plunged into some deep drama that we have no clue what it is about or why it is there. And it's only in the beginning of the second section that it becomes charming. But the beginning, this first page is so austerely beautiful, like a Greek column of ancient architecture, with a straightness and lack of any frivolous feeling. Second page, but elegantly charming and hinting more than expressing. But in this 2-against-3 with the bass melodically moving, Mademoiselle Boulanger always told me to follow Fauré's melodic bass with the melodic line. Opposite of the Slavic Russian ostinato, which is more the grounded way. And here it's constantly in motion, and then you have this quasi full step scale loosely, well, centered around F sharp. But we don't know that. And when then all of a sudden this moment of perhaps past bliss is interrupted with the return of the opening, austere, questioning the real questions philosophically, like the opening was. The first variation with moving 8th notes. This layered polyphony is more like zero gravity, where there is no up, there is no down, there is no middle, everything is everywhere. It's not grounded with a melody, though there are melodic elements, but is it? Is it? Or is it? It's all of them. It's a fantastic moment of intensity where you project to the audience music that is purely beautiful by its own expression, not the imitation of something else. I mentioned earlier this cheesy relation to the heartbeat pulse, short, long, which of course would be then descriptive rather than pure music. But I still believe that one can find in this pulse through the heart the siege of soul, unlike the Greeks who thought psyche, that it was in the breath that the soul was located and therefore evaporated after one dies. The heart is what in the Western culture we associate the soul to. We even say play by heart when we play without the score, as if to say with the soul, not only with the facts anatomically of the notes. And when we play these movements, in this extended 18/8, we don't even know anymore where is the bar. And Schumann, few half-century earlier years, would have written something more dotted rhythm, like the C-sharp minor variation of the Etude Symphonique. Well, it's imitative of Bach for him, but he often uses the dotted rhythms. Fauré doesn't often use dotted rhythms. He uses this short, long, that is sort of a loose dot. Pedagogically, the short is on the downbeat. So in that sense, it's even more intriguing because it's more unsettled. If it was, it would settle with a long beat, downbeat, and short beat, upbeat, ta-ra, ta-dee, ta-ra, dee. For Nadia with the waltz rhythm with a long on the down. But here it's short, long, short, long. The accent shouldn't be on the short. It should be even. Transition after the second page to the return of the opening page is very striking for this. I'll play for you that bridge. Vertiginous drop from frivolous to essential. And the very end of this nocturne, he succumbs to that lightness by finishing after the A section in C-sharp minor. The point is that Fauré, in the second ending after the recap, finishes charmingly in D flat major, in harmonic C sharp major. I was bothered for so long about why end frivolous? I thought frivolous was the distraction from the austere, and in fact, the austere was the distraction of the frivolous. At least in a perhaps seductive, elegant way. He finishes with lightness. When you feel that ending, you think of the 6th Nocturne, luminous D flat major, probably also inspired in part with a D flat major by Chopin Nocturne. And then the other nocturne in the same opus in Chopin, it's in C sharp minor. Mysterious rather than austere. And here is the opening of the 7th Nocturne in C sharp minor, when the 6th Nocturne was in D flat major, in which that C sharp minor 7th ends. Since he was so inspired by harpists and harp, for those who know his life, Fauré was an organist by trade and by education, since he went to a church music school rather than the conservatoire, which was a secular school, and he was a Madeleine church organist. I always try to think that the texture of his inner hearing, his harp organ, and in a way those very intense resonances and the low basses, like 32 16-feet pedals of organ, like the opening of Bach's Passacaglia for organ. But ends with a lightness. Of the harp, in my view. It's difficult to define the mood, the character, when the structure gives us so much to see behind the painting. And I find it fascinating when I visit an exhibit of paintings with an art historian who tells you the story of the painting, how, when, what was under the canvas before it was changed, how it was photoshopped for its time, and you realize that what you see is not what you get, but in fact is what you're supposed to see, if you don't know. And analyzing a piece like this or hearing it should not take away from that charm of the seduction or the depth of the, I would say, austere structure. It's almost like as if you can be gravely, elegantly charming, and that there is no pejorative need to be charming and frivolous and deep and perhaps austere, but you can be both. Perhaps that's a trait of French intellectual elite that manages to be deep with lightness of being, which to other cultures probably translates into some kind of inconsequence of the being. And I find it very touching, because when my teacher was teaching me Fauré, she was remembering her own years as a child studying with him, while I was a child studying with her. And I feel like his music speaks to me as if I have met him. Although she did not indulge in anecdotes about his moustache or what he was funnily evocative of, who knows, perhaps jokes and anecdotes. No, it was the music, the meaning of his music, the strictness of his music, and at the same time the lightness of his music. I think it was a delightful depth. My fingers so I can stop, because I wanted to say so many things that I think the music expressed itself while I wanted to suggest them in words, and then I thought, why? Words without thought never to heaven go, as Mademoiselle Boulanger was always quoting Shakespeare in English with her accent in French. But words also mean a lot. And in a way, in sensorial ways, when I play Fauré, I smell the gardens, I smell the smell of the flowers, of the trees, of the... It seems to me like a sensorial experience, like Françoise Gervais used to say, Fauré c'est mon pays, Fauré is my country. I feel like it's an ecosystem in which you don't exactly know in which key you are. You're floating between moods, between keys, but you're constantly in a very intensely tender, emotional experience. and in a way you're floating in the breeze or perhaps on the water. The 2 against 3, the whole tone scale, he can explain anatomically, but that doesn't explain the soul of it. Perhaps that's why I shouldn't try to explain it. And I personally find very intensely transformative to play Fauré at different ages, when I sight-read it, when I memorized it, and since I've filtered it in my system, I realize that it has taken different aspects through its life as a faithful companion decades along. As if it's revealing different fragrances at different time periods. Perhaps it's revealing itself under different light. Not that I wanted to ignore some, but perhaps one takes one side of the mountain to climb rather than another, and one discovers a different way the light hits the mountain tip. In any case, I want to say something about the middle section's return to the recapitulation. I find that the supreme elegance, Mozart does it so well in the A minor rondo, by having some kind of a pattern that you don't know how it's going to unveil itself and just land gracefully back into the recapitulation or the A section if it's just ABA. And in this case, he arrives at the point of non-return. So the dominant of C sharp minor clearly, but the grace of the whole tone scale that is unsettled harmonically or tonally, that was part of his. Or even his other section. Home from another point of view, and you go, oh, that's where I was. And then you see differently with the whole notes by 6/4 in the bass, the thirds this time instead of the single notes, or sixths in the patterns of short, long, heart pulse, as I called it earlier, a bit cheesily, and the melody. Top scale. Promised myself I won't teach singing, and that's all I do, because it's so silly to sing when you're not a singer, obviously. But it's so obvious to convey the meaning when you teach, as if the instrument we play is a proxy for others and not a percussive instrument on its own right only. But the fact is that one can be distracted by these plethora of important voices to follow, bring out, or perhaps get lost with. And to have the tenor and the alto and the bass. And one could go to the psychological ear, which is not always trained, of course, mostly never trained, to follow horizontal layers in continuum. And so we end up by hearing the moving parts. So it's not wrong, actually to verticalize, because pianists have to put two hands together, and sometimes the ear attention goes from one moving part to the other, and we end up by hearing some kind of a zigzag rather than following the tracks. But in this case, I close my eyes to follow them better. So for the sake of it, if I bring the tenor, if I bring the bass, the altos, or the soprano, they release themselves at different times in terms of the tensions into the slurs, into the shorter values, into the next tensions, but not at the same time. It's not chordal packaged slices of cakes, rather layers of cakes. So the decay takes care of some. You have to play softer the moving parts because they will be louder to follow them, holding decaying notes. Fa, mi, re, mi, do, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, and sing another si, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol. And hear it in your head, sing like as if you have a chorus in your head. And the beauty of it is that it does not need to aim towards an achieving which would be the climax, because there is no climax. The climax is ongoing and itself developing its own ecstasy in continuum. That's a Scriabinesque idea of constant high point. While here it's more linear, like an aqueduct on the length of miles of different topography under that trickles the water on a very small percentage of denivellation to bring it to the city in ancient Rome. True. The highest note being the high B, we can think, okay, this flat 3 with the first inversion, the high B being the highest note we play in the piece, is the climax, and then finish in major, or the first time in minor. So yes, there is a climax after all, but it's not what motivated the long bridging, building, sequential construction, step by step, but with connected voice leading, that in fact keeps us in a tension without release. And then when the release comes, it's more sense of freedom, of joy, of plenitude, of fulfillment, rather than the result of a tension, after which one can remain in that sense still in the fervor of spiritual uplifting. Could be also physical paroxysm, as well as spiritual rising of the soul, beautifying the humanity by its macro view on the micro details. It's a fascinating nocturne, the title of which doesn't reflect as much how intense the inner worlds of it are emotionally and intellectually fulfilling. Thank you.